Hi, today we're going to talk about one of the huge dictators of Russia. That's right, Joseph Stalin. Stalin was born in 1879 in a poor small village of Georgia. When he was little, he thought that his life was miserable and that life was not like treating him well. So this led for him to develop certain attitudes. He started to have a strong attitude. He thought that people needed to respect him, and also he thought that he was a being that was above everyone and should not be treated as a lower being. Years later of his childhood, his mother had sent him into a seminary hoping he would become a priest, but he never accomplished this because he was more attracted to revolutionary stuff that happened in his village. And unlike Lenin and Trotsky, dictators that were before him, he was not a person that really liked to talk. He was a person that was more violent. Stalin and his friends used to write documents about the situation of Russian workers. Lenin thought that Stalin was really rude and rough, but even though he thought these things about him, he gave him a small role in the new government of the Soviet Union. In 1922, Stalin was given a new role as the General Secretary of the Communist Party. Soon, this party was leading, you can say, the country. Why do I say, leading? Because people didn't choose him. They chose themselves to be the ones that were governing. In 1924, Lenin passed away, so this gave Stalin a chance to have a bigger role. He wanted to be the leader of all the party. So little things, he started defeating old people that were in the party. In 1927, Stalin started to defeat and exile Trotsky. And this was like a betrayal because Trotsky was supposed to be one of his right-hand men. In 1929, there were no Bolsheviks from the beginning of this revolutionary party. And only the people that were like loyal to him survived, except Trotsky. And also in 1929, Stalin finally assumed the power and started his dictatorship. He died in 1953 because of a stroke. Thank you.
Stalin had specific ideas of how politics should be done in the Soviet Union. But first, let's talk about a little bit of the background of this story. When Lenin died in 1924, the Politburo split it into two parts. The first part led by Leon Trotsky, which wanted to eliminate the NEP, that was a policy created by Lenin before he died, and wanted to industrialize the Soviet Union. And the other group was led by Stalin, that wanted to keep the NEP, the same policy, and didn't want to industrialize as he thought that it was too quick for the peasants and they wouldn't associate it. Stalin was the secretary of the Communist Party, but later he achieved to gain complete control of it, and in 1929 he eliminated all the Bolsheviks that formed part of the Trotsky Party. He created his own dictatorship, but he wasn't willing to share the government with the others, so he killed like 20 million people. That sent a clear message that the power was his own. How did economy work in the Soviet Union? Well, in the year of 1929, Stalin eliminated the NEP, the policy that Lenin created, even though his original plan was to stay with it, but instead he replaced it with a 5-year plan. This consisted on establishing a goal for the 5-year period. The main purpose of this plan was to transform from an agricultural country to an industrialized country, and so it did, even though again it wasn't his first idea when he became a dictator. But also, along this, many changes came, such as the collectivization, which consisted in transforming private farms as part of the government. But for obvious reasons, farmers didn't agree with this. So they stopped working, and this created serious economic problems and also made many people die from starvation.
Human rights are the one that make us, humans. What happens when this type of people come to power and think all they do is for a major cause? Well, this is a clear example of overpower. So up next, I will talk to you about some examples that happened throughout these ages. Some of these attitudes have men suffer over the consequences of them and also had a real bad time passing through it. So let's start with these examples. When Stalin came to power, he wanted an industrialized nation. He thought it was better that farmers didn't own land. This is a clear violation to the 17th article that states that any people can own a private property. So to keep away all his resistance, he did a law that forced labor to Siberia all the people that wasn't in the same page as he was. This is a clear violation to the Article 23 that says that any people can choose their job and how they want to get paid. Between 1936 and 1938, most of the old Bolsheviks were put on trial, and most of them were killed. This is a clear violation to the Article 3 that states that any person has the right of life, liberty, etc.
Joseph Stalin was one of the most successful leaders in World War II. He in part started the war as he signed a pact with German dictator or leader of Germany, Adolf Hitler. And he kind of started the war in part because as he signed the pact with Adolf Hitler, this encouraged Germany to invade Poland, and this led to the start of the war. Some battles, like the Battle of Stalingrad and the Battle of Kursk, were successfully won by this dictator or leader of Russia during World War II, and he had a very strong army of the Soviet army, and thanks to this he won these two battles and many more. Joseph Stalin, during World War II or before the World War II, he attended to a few meetings and high-level conferences with the two allied Churchill and Roosevelt in Huerta and Tehran, where they discussed the war against Germany and how Europe would be after the war. In 1939, Germany and Russia signed the Molotov Pact, in which they divided Europe in the eastern and western part, that was Russia and like the division of Russia and Germany. Finland sided Germany, and as they were allied in 1941, they made the Barbarossa operation against Russia, and Russia, as consequence for this, asked the Western countries for help. Russia declared war in 1945. It declared war to Japan, and Japan had to surrender because Russia had captured Manchuria from Japan, and 6 days later Japan surrendered because they couldn't do it anymore. When the World War II ended, Russia was the head of the Soviet Union, and during the war it was a very, very powerful country, and even though it suffered a lot of debts during the war.
How many million of debts Joseph Stalin was responsible for is still disputed, but that the figure runs into millions is no doubt. At the end, when he was approaching to his own death, his murderous people still carry out his orders. 13 years before he died, in 1914, Stalin gets into some serious war. German forces step into the country, and by December of 1941, he is almost in Moscow. Stalin refuses to leave the city. He says that he's willing to do whatever he needs to do to win the war. Many of the Soviet Union mourns the loss of this great power who took this Russia country from a feudal economy to an industrialized country.